Today, we are covering the Big 12 football conference, over and under wins, who will be the Big 12 champion from Gino G. Stay tuned with us.
And now, from Louisville, Kentucky, the horse capital of the world and sports junkies' finest, giving you wagering advice and sports analysis. It's On the Switch with your host, Gino G.
Welcome back, everybody, to On the Switch show. I'm Gino G, as always. With us today is also Travis. What up, Trav?
What's going on?
Today's episode, we'll be talking about Big 12 football, conference champion, over-under wins for certain teams. We like a couple of plays in this, and we'll be giving those out during the course of the episode. Today, though, I want to have a conversation with you all. At On the Switch, we always give you all value. Whether it's a sport or horse racing, whatever it may be that we are talking about on the show, we always give you value. Over the past 7 days, I've worn a pair of sunglasses that have given me value to my life. I have worn them all 7 days when I go to work. A buddy of mine who I work with, he comes up to me and he says, "Hey man, what are those?" He goes, "Wow, these are," he feels them. He goes, "Wow, these are really nice." I said, "Man, let me tell you something." I said, "These are Shady Rays. What the frames are made out of are extremely durable. So it doesn't matter what lifestyle you have, these sunglasses are for you." I said, and I know it gives you that comfort and that feel of that $300 or $400 pair of sunglasses, but I promise you, these are only a fraction of that cost. At Shady Rays, I back this company because they give back to the community. 25% off if you're in the military, both active and retired. And then for every purchase of sunglasses, you get lifetime craftsmanship warranty. If you misplace, lose, get stolen, they break, they will send you a pair back, the same pair. And then on top of that, every purchase as well, they send 11 meals to fight hunger. This is a company that you all need to back. Shady Rays, I promise you, because of everything that I've said, comfort, feel, style, giving back to the community. This is a pair of sunglasses that I will wear for the rest of my life, and I will never wear another pair. ShadyRays.com. Make sure you use promo code SWITCH to get an exclusive buy one, get one free offer. Big 12 football, as we said, back at it. What's interesting about the Big 12 this season is outside of Oklahoma, this is completely wide open. Even Oklahoma, when you look at their schedule, seems a little bit daunting. So they're not necessarily just a layup like Alabama and Clemson are. And in my opinion, even Washington. This is not a layup team. So we'll go through all of the teams in this conference. We'll go over their over and unders. I'll give a selection for a few. We'll also talk about towards the end of the show, or maybe periodically through the show, where the value might come when it comes to the Big 12 as a whole, conference champions. So we'll start off at the top. Oklahoma. Their over-under is 10 games, 10 wins, and they are plus 130 to win the Big 12. When you look at their schedule, I said it's daunting. It starts the second week. They play UCLA. UCLA, now new coach, Chip Kelly. I'm not sure if this is how do I want to say it, like a game in which you can see the amount of talent that they have, or are they going to struggle this year? I don't know if UCLA is that team, but the next game after that is at Iowa State. And we know how all the games go when it's in Ames. Ames, their fans, they go absolutely bonkers for their team. Oklahoma might struggle in that third game of the year. That will be the key game in which is this team real or are they fake? And by fake, that means not winning the Big 12, not being a remote sniff of the college football playoff. So, yes, you lose Baker Mayfield from last season, right? Heisman Trophy winner. We know all the accolades that Baker Mayfield had. Now you have Kyler Murray. What's interesting about him, he's on a 1-year deal basically with Oklahoma. He signed a contract with I believe it was the Seattle Mariners for baseball for like $4 million. But he says, "Hey, is there any chance that I can play 1 year at Oklahoma?" And they said, "Sure, whatever you want to do." So he comes in, he has a wicked arm, and that's undeniable. The issue comes, even in high school, this kid struggled hitting his target. You're talking about sub 60% completion percentage in high school. Yes, that could have been part of the wide receiving core at the high school that he plays in. It could be him, We'll find out quickly in a couple of games. With him behind, though, running backs, wide receivers. Check this out. You got Rodney Anderson, who I believe could be a sneaky play to be the Big 12 Player of the Year, running back. Then you have Marquise Brown, CD Lamb at wide receiver. They will have 4 of their 5 starting linemen from last season back. So you're talking about a team that is absolutely loaded on the offensive side of the ball. Is Kyler Murray that guy? Can he be the next, I hate saying this, quote-unquote, Baker Mayfield to take them to the next level? I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to be skeptical. I don't want to be the guy that's not backing Oklahoma because I think they're going to be really, really good. It's just when you get a guy like this that's so hyped and possibly overhyped, they can quite often underperform. So Oklahoma, again, offensively, going to be stud. Defensively, here's where things get a little bit interesting. Defensively, they'll have a lot of returning players, but if you remember from last season, the returning players were subpar at best. You're talking about the national or the semifinal in the college football playoff. They gave up 40-something points to Georgia. Multiple games last year, they gave up 30-plus points. This wasn't a defense that was just top 10 in every category. This was a defense that was sub 50 in almost every category. The only category that they were towards the top was turnover ratio. I have a lot of questions on the defense. Yes, they have some talent coming back, but if they want to win a Big 12 title, the defense has to show up. Last season, not so well on the defense side of the ball. They have to improve this year. I do like Oklahoma at the over-under of 10. When you look at their schedule, again, they got UCLA second week. Third week is Iowa State. Then they have, I don't want to say a couple of weeks off, but you play Army and Baylor. Baylor's going to be improved. We'll talk about them a little bit later. But then you play it says at Texas, but it's always a neutral site game. Then you go at TCU, then a sneaky Kansas State team at home, at Texas Tech, and then Oklahoma State, and then obviously you end the year at West Virginia. So there are some tough games in this stretch. I think over under 10 is a legitimate number, and I think after the third week, you'll know whether or not Oklahoma is real. Over under 10, like I said, is a good number. I'm not going to take one side or another. I will say if perhaps I were to play this, and I had to play it, I would lean towards the under for Oklahoma. Next might be the most intriguing team in the entire Big 12, and that's Texas. Texas over-under is 8.5. And, Travis, we talked about this on a previous podcast. Tom Herman might have something to do with this whole Ohio State spiel. Do you think that rolls over into this season, or do you think it kind of is water under the bridge?
Yeah, I think unaffected.
So,
but I wish it did because that's interesting.
Well, I mean, it is one of those things where all of a sudden now, Tom Herman's name is down, scrolling at the bottom of ESPN saying he's denying reports that he was the one that turned in Zach Smith. And you're like, hold up, what? Are you kidding me right now? And so it has this whole new twist to the entire thing. And then, of course, I don't want to get into an entire spiel because we'll talk about the Big Ten and Ohio State in the next episode. But then Zach Smith buying sex toys, that's sent to the university, having sex with an Ohio State staff member. The list goes on forever. And now
nude pics
in the White House? Yeah, in White House. I mean,
wow.
Come on, man. Come on. And now Tom Herman somehow gets drug into this. It just makes you wonder that perhaps this could lean into the season for Texas just in general. Maybe he wants out. Maybe this is his way out. He's denying reports, but really he wants to get out. But when it comes to football this season, you look at their schedule, right? Right out of the box, there's a Maryland team that's statistically is not going to be very good. But when you go to Maryland all of a sudden now becomes a tough game. This is a game that Texas doesn't really want. If Texas is going to have a good season and the over and under is 8.5 wins, you have to win this game at Maryland. If you lose that game, it could be a spiral out of control. The tough games for them, then just a couple of weeks later, you host USC. So then after that, then you host TCU. Then you go to Kansas State. Then Oklahoma at home. You're talking about the first few games you have at Maryland, then Tulsa, who they should trounce. But then USC, TCU at home, at Kansas State, and then OU at home. Perhaps, if it goes the absolute worst, you're talking about a team that could be 1-5 in their first 6 games. 1-5. You don't think Texas board members want Herman's head if he goes 1-5 the first 6 games of the season? Look, he seemed to find a guy in Erlanger at quarterback. I like Buechele better personally, but Buechele's more of the quarterback that I would tend to lean towards, but Erlanger seems to be Herman's guy. Outside of that, you have 7 players returning, a couple of linemen. You have a couple of guys, on the outside. I don't know, Reggie Hemphill Maps. You start looking at some of these names, and you're like, I don't know offensively if this is a team that's going to put up 30 or 40 points. The Big 12 is always known for just scoring points at will. I mean, every team, just scoring. When you have Erlanger throwing to a guy like Reggie Hemphill Maps, I don't know if that's like the combination that you want. Erlanger showed a lot of improvement towards the end of the last season. So I think he can use that momentum into this season, but we'll find out quickly if this is going to be the guy that they use moving forward. I think Buechele will get his shots, but it could be towards the end of the season when the reality already has set in that it's going to be just a terrible season. But over under 8.5, you look at this schedule, and again, I just don't see a ton of like gimme wins. 8.5 seems like a fair number that was on Bovada yesterday. I'm going to lean towards under. I don't know if they can go 9-3. If they do, they're going to have to go like 5-1 in their first 6 games. And I just don't see that happening. So I'm going to lean towards under. I don't really love it one way or another, but definitely leaning towards under. When talking about the defense, though, and here's what's interesting. The defense was top-notch in the Big 12. They gave up less than 21 points a game, which hasn't happened since Mac Brown era. You look at all the guys that they lost. Malik Jefferson, Poona Ford, Deshaun Elliott, Holton Hill. I know they did a great job recruiting players, especially top high school players, top JUCO players to come in and fill spots. But there are a lot of question marks on this defensive side. And this is crazy because I never in a million years did I think here at On the Switch we would be talking about a kicker, especially in college. In the NFL, a kicker who can kick 55, 60-yard field goals is a significant weapon. Because if all you had to do is get it to the 50, the 40-yard line, and it's basically a guaranteed field goal, that's a serious weapon. In college football, you don't really have that. Now, check this out. We always give statistics, analysis, right? Michael Dixon was the punter, the kicker for Texas last season. He set a Big 12 and NCAA record last season with 42 punts that were downed inside the 20. Like, are you kidding me? Here's the thing. The defense was good, right? But if the opposing team is always on their own 10-yard line, starting every single possession, they're limited offensively as far as what play calls that they can call. So the defense can attack those sort of plays. Makes the defense a whole lot easier. They don't have that weapon this year. I know there are a lot of questions on the defensive side, and I think in a conference in which there's a lot of scoring, it's going to be their downfall. I don't like Texas. I don't want to forecast, but I definitely don't like them to win the Big 12. I think this is a team that regresses big time. You're talking about a team that could win 5 games. If they make a bowl game, I'm not going to necessarily call it a good year because it's not a good year at Texas standard. But a bowl game would be a surprise for me. I think it's a big regression for Texas. Next is the most, I hate using the word intriguing because I use it all the time. I think you've even talked about it before where it's like, bro, use something other than intriguing. I'm like, okay, West Virginia has the biggest upside, but perhaps could have the biggest downside when it comes to the Big 12. West Virginia's over-under is 7, and they are plus 700 to win the Big 12. Now, they start out first game of the year against Tennessee. Tennessee, new coach. We're not really sure exactly what we're going to get from Tennessee. So that won't be a staple game in which you can say, whoo, yeah, West Virginia, they're good. They're good. But I will tell you, and it seems to be the third week for every single one of these teams. Third week, they go to NC State. NC State has quarterback in Finley who's going to toss it all over the yard, and especially all over this defense. This defense was 94th overall in total defense last season. They were 99th against the pass, and of course, they were 87th against the run. Unbelievably bad. Now, I know they got a couple of guys in from Clemson, A&M, and USC. I know they went out and got the top 3 JUCOs, 2 safeties, and a corner. I'm not sure if that's going to be enough. When I said they have the biggest upside, all these guys who are really good 4-star, and there's 2 actually 5-star guys out of high school that are now on this team. If they all come together as one, watch out. This defense could be, I'm not going to say top notch, but as good as the offense is going to be, they don't really have to do a whole lot. And if they just come together just a little bit, the upside is unreal for this team. And when talking about offensively, the first thing that comes to mind is Will Grier. Will Grier went to Florida, ends up at West Virginia. A really unfortunate event happened last season in the Texas game. He breaks his finger. He was going to throw for close to 4,000 yards and 35, 40 touchdowns. Most of them going to go to David Sills. I will say 12 to 15 times this season you'll hear Will Grier to David Sills for a touchdown. They're going to be a dynamic duo again in the Big 12, and that's why offensively West Virginia is never going to struggle. But they might struggle defensively to get a stop. Outside of Will Grier and David Sills, Yadni Kajusti, I could be completely blowing this away, but it's an offensive lineman, right, that comes back as a senior who is going to be drafted high, first 2 rounds probably. Last season, he's like, hey man, I'm going to stay. Let's win a Big 12 title. Then you add Alabama transfer at wide receiver, Marcus Sims. And I think Sims will be the deep threat for Will Grier, as Sills will be the more common guy, the more regular route guy, the guy who gets all the receptions. There will be a core of running backs that I think Holgorsen will use. Offensively, again, West Virginia going to be dynamic on the offensive end. Defense will be whether or not this team wins 10 games or wins 6. When you look at their schedule, I mean, good grief. At NC State, at Tennessee, 2 non-conference games. I know Tennessee might be down this season, but in Knoxville, a new coach, maybe a new era, a new life for Tennessee fans. They're going to come out in full force against a West Virginia team that's going to be ranked in the top 20. Then you go to Texas Tech, to Iowa State, to Texas, and to Oklahoma State. These are 4 games that are just they're not gimmies. They're not gimmies. And of course, you still have to play Kansas State, TCU, Oklahoma at home. It's really going to be all up to the defense. And also, Will Grier has to stay healthy. He has to stay healthy. Seems to be notorious of getting injured. Has to stay healthy if West Virginia has any chance to win the Big 12. Over under 7. I'm going to lean towards over just because of the upside, but I can definitely see this team winning 5 or 6 games as well. Next up, we have the Horned Frogs. Texas Christian, TCU, over under 7.5. They're plus 700 to win the Big 12. Interesting team from the standpoint that Sean Robinson is a capable quarterback, but he's not dynamic. He's not the most aggressive, is a good word to use. He's takes what the defense gives him, doesn't do really anything extra, controls the game, doesn't turn the ball over, and I think that's exactly what this team needs. They will have the best defense in the Big 12, 100%. There's no doubt in my mind. I think there's upside for a couple of other teams to be top-notch, including OU, but especially from a run standpoint, TCU will have the best in the Big 12. The best. Again, we talked about Sean Robinson. They'll have a running back core that is young, but fast and big. They have 1 returning starter from last season and have a 4-star JUCO coming in at tackle on the offensive line that makes things a little bit sketchy. If the O-line goes, this team is going to go as far as they want, which includes Big 12 title. I think this is a legitimate team that has a chance to win the Big 12 if the offensive line can produce to the point of where I know they can go. Again, we talked about defensively. They will be the most dynamic defense, fast, big, strong, aggressive. They'll turn you over. The 3 Bs will be back at it this season. Blakelock, Bethley, and Banigo. They combined for the number 1 rush defense last season, as we said. Jawan Johnson transfers in. He'll be the key for them. He comes in from Northern Illinois. He has the skill set to be an All-American. They'll have to anchor that linebacking core. They are moving some pieces around from safety to corners to fill spots in the secondary. But I tell you what, this defense, aggressive, and they're going to be leaned on quite heavily, as I don't think the TCU offense will be as dynamic as some of the teams in the Big 12. But defensively, they will be heads above everybody else in this conference. And that's what gives them an advantage when it comes to the Big 12. When you look at their games, their schedule, you play Southern, then at SMU, then third game of the season, as we've said with basically every single team. You want a staple game to see how good are you really? They play Ohio State at home, third week of the season. You want to know how good TCU is? You're about to find out. You play at Texas after that, then Iowa State at home. If you get drubbed by Ohio State, there's a chance that you could lose the Texas game. If you lose the Texas game, there's a chance that at home you could lose the Iowa State game. After that, the schedule seems to be pretty favorable. You get Texas Tech and Oklahoma at home. You go to Kansas. You have Kansas State at home. At West Virginia will be a key game late in the season, especially if they're in contention for the Big 12. At Baylor, kind of a sneaky game. Then Oklahoma State at home. If you get through those first 5 games with success, even if you lose to Ohio State, but you beat Texas and Iowa State, the rest of the schedule sets up pretty favorably for a team that's going to be super tough at home and super tough defensively. That's TCU. Next up, we have the Cowboys, Oklahoma State. No, not Dallas. Okay, that's Trav. That's Friday. Okay, that's Friday. We'll talk about the Dallas Cowboys on Friday. Oklahoma State Cowboys over under 8. They're also plus 700 to win the Big 12. It's interesting because when you lose Mason Rudolph and James Washington, how in the hell can the over under be 8? Well, I mean, just look. First of all, you have the coach in Gundy, who has by far the best hair of the Big 12. There's no doubt. I mean, the guy struts a mullet. I mean, let's be real. The guy's legit. And if you look over the past 5 seasons, they've won 10 games 4 of the last 5 seasons. This is a guy who just doesn't lose. I will say, though, when you lose the production of Mason Rudolph and James Washington, it is almost impossible to just rebound and say, hey, we're going to win 10 games again. When you look at their schedule, first 2 games, kind of gimmies. And then third game. Is this not a repeat? Every single team, third game. Guess what? They host Boise State. And we'll talk about Boise State on the next episode. We'll talk about, obviously the Big Ten, as we said, and then we'll talk about Notre Dame and Boise State. Reason why we'll talk about Boise State is I think, hot take, you can write this in the notes, Boise State will go undefeated this season. Boise State undefeated this season. That's why I think this game is important when we're talking about Oklahoma State. You look at some of their away games. You have Kansas, Kansas State, Baylor. These aren't tough road games. You're not going to TCU. Excuse me, you are going to TCU very last game of the year, but you're not going to West Virginia. You're not going to Texas. You're not going to Iowa State. So you get favorable away games. Then you get West Virginia, like I said, Texas at home, Iowa State at home, Texas Tech at home. So the schedule does seem favorable, although the back end of their schedule seems really tough with at Baylor, at Oklahoma, West Virginia, then at TCU, last 4 games of the season. But over under 8, it's a good number. I'm going to lean towards the under just because I don't think that Mason Rudolph and James Washington obviously being gone, I just don't think you can just replace them. The defense, they do return 7 starters, so that is a positive. But new defensive coordinator, so they're going to have to learn a different scheme. Usually when that happens, it's the second season in which there's a huge progression forward. I think you can see a regression this season. And so over under 8, I'm going to lean towards under, but of course Gundy and that hair, I'm telling you, you can't ever really pick against his hair. So that's Oklahoma State. Next up, we have the Wildcats. No, Travis, no, not Kentucky. Okay, Kansas State, the team that beat Kentucky in the NCAA tournament to go to the Elite 8. Kansas State Wildcats, their over-under is 6. They are 16-1 to win the Big 12. And, man, I tell you what, Coach Snyder, I love him. I don't know how old he is. He's probably 90. No, it's true. Like, he's no idea how old he is, but he's got to be in his mid-70s. and he wins 7 or 8 games every year, and it's no more and no less than 7 or 8 games. I mean, it's just insane. He just pumps out bowl game after bowl game after bowl game after bowl game. Over under 6, which just on the surface looks like an automatic over just because you know that he's going to win 7 or 8 games. When you look at it, though, he has 2 quarterbacks he has to choose from in Delton and Thompson. Both of them had success last season. But to be honest with you, that success was what I would consider limited success. Neither one of them were quite pretty to look at. I will lean with Thompson because of his playmaking ability with his feet. That's not to say that Delton won't start because he does have the better arm. I'm just concerned with the limited experience. I don't want to say ability because they have freshmen and young players that have a lot of talent. But the inexperience is what's going to be crucial when playing in the Big 12, right? You have a lot of games that are going to be shootouts. Can these young players perform at a high level? Not really sure. And of course, I'm not crazy about either one of the quarterbacks. Offensively, I think this team will struggle. Defensively, though, a lot of talent has moved on from the front 6 and front 7. Linemen, linebacking core. A lot of these guys just moved on, but now you have Duke Shelley and Kendall Adams in the secondary that are going to hold it down. Can they get enough stops on the defensive side of the ball through teams that will tend to run the ball more? Because I feel like teams that pass, heavy pass, when you have a secondary that is experienced and talented as they have, you're not going to get a whole lot through the air, okay? Running the ball, though, with all the pieces that they lost in the front 6, front 7, I'm concerned that they're going to get run all over. So that's going to be the biggest key. Offense is not going to score a whole lot of points. Defense has to hold their own if they want to make another bowl game. Kansas State, over under 6. I'm going to lean over just because Bill Snyder always wins 7 or 8 games. But I think 6 is a good number. I think they do go 6-6. You look at their schedule. You play at West Virginia, at Oklahoma, at TCU, at Iowa State, at Baylor, which is going to be a tough game. You know, these are 5 games that I just don't know how many of those you win. And so if you won all of the home games, that's 7-5. You know, so maybe they sneak a road game in and get a win. But at the end of the day, I think 6-6 is where they belong. So I think that's a good number. I would lean over just because Coach Snyder always wins 7 or 8 games. So I would lean over. Next up, we have the Cyclones of Iowa State. Iowa State was kind of like the great story of college football last season. Kyle Kemp, the quarterback, gets a 6th year. The NCAA says, hey, Kyle Kemp, it's okay. 6th year. Come on, bring it on. Then you get David Montgomery who returns. But who's going to catch the ball with Lazard gone? Lazard was Kemp's go-to guy. If he needed a bailout, Lazard was the guy. Hakeem Butler and Matt Eaton, there are huge targets for Kemp to hit. I'm concerned with Kemp's arm. When you watch the games, check this out. You know how many attempts he had over 20 yards last season? 4. He had 4 passes over 20 yards through the air. Now, he had some passes that were 5 yards that maybe went 30, right? But attempted passes over 20 yards, 4. So you know his arm is limited at best. You want big targets because, frankly, I mean, it's a lot of in routes. You're going to be dumping it off a lot to running backs and stuff. But what Iowa State makes their money on is defense. 2 key guys back, Ray Lima at nose tackle and Jaquan Bailey. Both of those guys will get after the quarterback. They only allowed 20 points per game last season. That's what made them the story of college football last season. Their ability to stop everybody. It didn't matter what kind of offense you had, they were going to stop you. Then, of course, when you played a game in Ames, watch out. They never liked losing in Ames. Never did. Coach Campbell gets those kids to play hard. And if there's one thing now under Coach Campbell's regime, Iowa State, there's one thing that you will not get from them, and that's weakness. They will come out there and smack you right in the mouth. They might get smacked twice back, but they will come out and smack you right in the mouth. And a lot of teams kind of back down. They're like, whoa, hey, whoa, hey, whoa, what was that about? You know? And a lot of teams got caught off guard. I like the fact Marcel Spears ranked 6th in tackles last season at linebacker. He's back. They will be young and athletic, big, and of course, the way Coach Campbell coaches the secondary, they are a press-first defense. So they're going to crowd you at the line. They're going to make you fight them off at the line. And that's how the secondary, although they're going to be young, they are big and they're strong. That's how they're going to play all these teams. They could easily get burned. But with the talent at linebacker and the talent up front, these guys will get to the quarterback. So it's up to those young secondaries, and especially at safety. Man, they're going to start 2 true freshmen at safety. It's tough to do, especially in the Big 12. But if those guys can perform just at a mediocre level, defense is going to be stout again. Over under 6.5 for Iowa State. I'm going to lean towards over because they have a lot of home games in Ames, in which they will win majority, if not all of those. They have a winnable game at Kansas. So over under 6.5. I'll take the over with, again, winnable games at Kansas and at Iowa. Then the rest of the home games, obviously, they'll always have a chance in those games as well. Iowa State, over and under 6.5. They're 20-1 to win the Big 12, but I will take the over 6.5. Now, all the talk in Big 12, and especially Big 12 Media Day, and now you watch other YouTube videos or a lot of other podcasts. One of the things that I have learned since podcasting is what they call media hits. What this is, media hits, is when somebody like myself touts a certain team or a certain player. They get what's called a media hit. Baylor, their over-under is 5.5. They won 1 game last season. They were 1-11. Do you know how many hits they have for people covering the Big 12? 72. More than every other team in the Big 12 besides Oklahoma. 72 hits. Here's the reason why. Baylor won 1 game, as I said, last season. They lost 4 games by less than 7 points. They lost another 2 games between 8 points and 11 points. That's 6 wins. Perhaps there were 1 possession or 1 or 2 possessions late in the fourth quarter. They also led 5 times going into the fourth quarter. Lost all of those games. Talking about a team that instead of 1 game, they could have won 6. Now you have, under Matt Rule, a quarterback now. You know who it is. It's Charlie Brewer. Charlie Brewer reminds you a lot of some of the successful quarterbacks in the Art Briles era. And now, the reason why I think Baylor is getting all the hits is a guy named Jalen Hurd. I know y'all are probably listening and saying, oh, wait. Jalen Hurd. I've heard it. I know who that is. And you're right. He used to be Tennessee's running back. Transfers to Baylor, and Baylor says, hey, man, you are huge. Bro, you need to play wide receiver. He's like, all right, I'll try it out. And everything that you read, everything that you listen to, everything that you see on video, he's winning every single drill, every single day. Doesn't matter where it's running, sprints, weights, catches. He caught 74 balls with a cornerback hitting his hand, so he almost had to catch it one-handed. He caught 74 balls out of the automatic football dispenser thing. I forget what it's called. I know it sounds so stupid, but what is that called? It's like automatic thrower. They just fill footballs in. He caught 74 in a row as someone's hanging on his hand. 74 in a row. They think he is the next big thing. Now, running back is going to be a big question mark for them. And it's intriguing to me because now you have Jalen Hurd. It's like, I know you want to put him at wide receiver, but Jalen Hurd running at Tennessee was super successful. Why wouldn't you put him back there? Toss it to him every once in a while. Put him in the slot and, toss it to him.
Definitely.
I don't understand why you wouldn't use it, and maybe they are. But on top of Jalen Hurd, you have Mims, Platt, Holmes, Snead, Strickland, who are also all wide receivers that Brewer has to throw to. This guy has all the weapons that he needs to score 50 points a game, just like old Baylor ways. Putting up, how many did they put up against that one division? What did they put up, 80 or something that one time? It's something just completely bizarre where we're all like, bro, just shut it down. I mean, white flag it, just take a knee. But Baylor, especially recent years, everybody knows Baylor as the team that just scores a bunch of points. Now, of course, as we said, Art Brow's gone, that entire spiel. Matt Rule in, but Matt Rule, he's kind of the same guy. He's like, hey, man, let's go score points, So he has all the intangibles, all the weapons to score as many points as they can, as many points as they want to. And what's most intriguing, I think, from a hit standpoint that all these people are talking about is defensively. Phil Snow now in his second season, and we just talked about it. Typically, second season under a defensive coordinator, they take a huge step forward, and that's what he's expecting this year. I like the fact Arnold, Houston, Hand at cornerback. You get Lewis, Roy, Hunt, and Johnson on the defensive line that are huge. I wonder about safeties, though. Safeties are always key in the Big 12 because there's so much passing. There's so many yards through the air. Secondary is going to be a big question mark. But Phil Snow, in an interview, said, I'm not worried. I'm not worried. Interesting because he does have a lot of returning players, a lot of talent on that side, on that side of the ball. Second year, if they take another step forward, as they took a step forward last season, although 1-11, you're talking about they held Oklahoma to under 30 points. They held Oklahoma State to under 30 points. They held Texas Tech to under 30 points. Texas, under 30 points. You're talking about some of the top dogs in the Big 12 that just score 40, 50 points at will. They didn't score 30. So if they take another progression forward, Phil Snow thinks, hey, for Baylor, sky's the limit. Over-under is 5.5. It was 6 at one point. At 6, from one win last season to now preseason over-under wins, 6 is the highest ever NCAA history from one season to another, 5 games. It's the highest ever. Now, there have been production as far as win totals, like at UCF. Scott Frost went season before they went 0-12. They took them to 6-6 or something, or 7-5. So they won 7 games, but they weren't predicted that many games. It's the highest ever.
That's crazy.
Over under 5.5. I don't know. I don't know if I buy it. How do you win one game, not finish off all these games that you lead? How do you all of a sudden say, hey, yeah, definitely they're going to win 6 games for sure? Do they have the ability? Do they have the talent? There is no doubt. No doubt. I'm still going to lean towards under. Look at their schedule. They play at Oklahoma, at Texas, at West Virginia, at Iowa State, and at Texas Tech. These are road games that you just don't want to play. It's just not an easy schedule to say the least. Then, of course, you play Duke at home, and Duke's going to be really good. You still have to play Oklahoma State, TCU, and Kansas State at home. I just don't see 6 wins this season. Maybe next season, Brewer will be a senior. Some of these wide receivers will be seniors. I think that's when you take the next step forward. This season, I'm going to lean towards under, but let's watch Baylor this entire season because they could be the talk of the NCAA, especially if they catch fire and all things are firing on all cylinders. This could be a team that could do a lot of damage in the Big 12. So there's 2 teams left, Texas Tech and Kansas. And let's go ahead and eliminate one, Kansas. I don't care if you said, hey, Gene, I'll give you $1,000,000 for Kansas to win the Big 12. I'd be like, no thanks, man. I'll take no at minus 10 million. It's crazy to say because Kansas is so dominant when it comes to college basketball in the Big 12. So dominant. And then it comes to football, they can't win a game. It's unreal. They can't win a game. I feel bad almost in a way for Kansas football just because the basketball team is so successful that you're left with this football team. It's just like, man, what the hell? Like, how can we turn this around?
Who's that remind you of? Oh, Kentucky?
That's
what it reminds me of.
Let's be honest. Kentucky has made bowl games, but the success rate in football, when you're talking about comparing with basketball, is not even comparable.
I'm sorry, I had to.
Not even close, right? So let's go ahead and eliminate Kansas, right? Their over-under was 3. I'm going to lean towards under just because I just never see Kansas winning 4 football games. How about this? The basketball team will have more wins there will be a week. How about this? There will be a week in Kansas's season. let's say Monday to Monday, where they'll win as many or more games in a week than the whole football team will in an entire season.
What? How's that work?
Okay, so if they play Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, or Monday, Thursday, Saturday, Monday, right? So they play 4 games in a 7-day span. They'll win all 4 of those games, and Kansas will win Kansas will win 3 games or less. So Kansas in 1 week, basketball, will win more games in a week than Kansas football will in an entire season. That's horrible.
That's crazy.
It's horrible. Kansas, no
Hot
thanks.
garbage.
Hot garbage.
Whew.
They're 100-1 to win the Big 12, and no thanks. I'll take the no at minus 18,000. Like, I don't care. Like, they're never winning the Big 12, and they're never winning more than 3 games. They might win 3 games, but they're not winning any more than 3 games. And most likely, hot take, which is not really a hot take, Kansas will not win a Big 12 game. They will not win a Big 12 game this season. Last but not least, we have the best dressed man in the Big 12. Now, we had the greatest hair in Gundy. Now we have the best dressed man in Cliff Kingsbury, okay? Cliff with his Ray-Ban sunglasses every game. You know, drives me nuts with that. It's like, bro, you're coaching a football team. What are you wearing?
It is raining, sir. It is cloudy.
Like, and he's got this like quarter zip, you know, it looks like he's going out on a Friday night, you know? He's like, bro, I'm going out. Oh wait, I have to coach football first. Like, this is so crazy to me because I'm like, what is he wearing, bro? Obviously, he has top-notch shoes. He has the Ray-Bans on. He's got the, you know, the quarter zip up. He's got the nicest khakis you've ever seen in your life. You're like, wow. But, man, he goes out there and coaches, and wow, his team can't win. Like, holy shit.
But he looked good losing.
Definitely. Best dressed coach in the NCAA, and it's not even close. Not even close. There's not even a close second. Cliff Kingsbury, what's interesting about Cliff Kingsbury is he's one of the most successful quarterbacks at Texas Tech of all time. And that's why I almost, in a way, feel bad for him. Because he loves Texas Tech. And I remember when he got hired at Texas Tech, Lubbock was crazy for him. Crazy for him. They were like, oh my God, our man is coming home. Cliff Kingsbury, he's coming home. He's going to take us everywhere. Now you read some articles from inside of Lubbock and whatnot, and possibly Cliff Kingsbury could be on the hot seat. If he doesn't produce this year, perhaps he could be out of his job. To me, if he makes a bowl game, I just don't see how their man, as everybody calls him, their man, how they can let him go by continuously making bowl games. Just a couple of seasons ago, he won 10 games. You know, it's not a guy that's just really struggling to make bowl games. Like, he's making bowl games. He's just not taking them to that next level. This season, wow. Over under 6. I don't know how they win 6 games. You look at their schedule, they play Ole Miss. And we talked about Ole Miss in the SEC episode. Ole Miss is going to score 1 billion points. They might not stop anybody, but they will score 1 billion points. Texas Tech's defense, we'll get to that in a minute, but wowzers. That game will dictate the entire season. They lose that game, in which they are a favorite currently, Vegas. They are a 3-point favorite. Texas Tech loses that game. They have no chance of winning 6 games. None. 2 games after that, 3rd game of the season, they play at home, which I believe, I know it's listed as a home game, but I actually believe it's a neutral site game against Houston. Houston going to be good this year. They're not going to be great, but they're going to be good. Texas Tech is not that good. Again, another game in which they can lose. Then they go to Oklahoma State, West Virginia at home, and then to TCU. You're talking about a team that could be 1-5 before you blink. At that point, they're not going 5-1 the rest of the season. No way. Where they still have to go to Iowa State, to Kansas State, to Baylor, and they play OU and Texas in between. No chance. You'll find out very first week of the season if Cliff Kingsbury is going to keep his job. They get blown out by Ole Miss, you'll hear all the roars about Cliff Kingsbury. Get out of here. That's going to be the key. Crazy to me, Kingsbury has always produced quarterbacks. You might not have heard them on the recruiting trail. They might have not have been 4-star or 5-star guys, but he always produces quarterbacks. This season, who's playing quarterback? That's the biggest question. He's got 4 guys on the roster. Who's playing quarterback? We don't know. I mean, Cliff Kingsbury in his media day, he said it's open market. Whoever wins the job wins the job. That to me is scary because typically guys like him, Mike Leach, guys that just toss the ball 56, Gundy. Those guys, they always have a guy. They know who the next guy is. Cliff Kingsbury's like, I don't know. We'll find out. We'll see. I'm nervous for Kingsbury because he's losing recruits to Texas A&M, to even SMU, to Texas San Antonio, UTSA. He's losing recruits to them. I mean, if you're losing recruits to even the small schools in Texas, there's an issue here. There's an issue. I like the fact that TJ Vasher's back at wide receiver. He's going to be the go-to guy with whoever will be taking the snaps. The offensive line will be the stranglehold. They'll have the stranglehold on the entire offense. They return everybody. They're successful. So whoever's at quarterback is going to have the opportunity to throw the ball. But you don't have any pass catchers. You don't have a leading rusher. Again, as I mentioned, you have Vasher who will be on the outside, who will be probably the go-to guy for whoever is going to be tossing the ball, but that's it. You have literally one returning skill player. One. That's Vasher. Everybody else will be young, inexperienced, JUCO. A lot of question marks on that side. Everybody says, well, the defense got better last year. Well, okay. I can see where people would say that. But you look at the stats, no, they didn't. Although the numbers seem to be lower, the output seemed to be lower. Check this out. They still ranked 92nd total defense. How are you going to win games being 92nd in the NCAA? Total defense. You return a lot of players, but again, it's just one of those things. If the players didn't produce anything, who cares if you return a lot of players? A lot of players who didn't produce anything seems still like nothing to me. Yes, maybe they take another step forward, perhaps. But I think Kingsbury's biggest key is going to be offense. Defense, we know that they're not going to play much defense. Again, maybe they get a little bit better, but people are still going to be able to score almost at will against them. Texas Tech has always been that team. It's like, look, man, hey, you score 62 or 63, we're going to score 1 point more than you. This season, it's not going to be like that. They're going to have to rely on the defense. Over, under, again, 6, I just don't see it. Especially offensively, I don't see how they win 6 games with that schedule. I think there is a possibility that they even go 1-5 their first 6 games, and Cliff Kingsbury loses his job after game 6. When talking about the Big 12 as a whole, for Texas Tech, they're 25-1 to win the Big 12. No thanks. Hard pass. Okay. So now that we have covered every team, we know there are teams that we don't like. Kansas. Hell no. Maybe in November when we're talking about college basketball, perhaps we can mention Kansas in a positive light. College football? No. Texas Tech? No thanks. We know Bill Snyder. He's going to win 7 or 8 games literally every single year in and year out. I don't like them to win the Big 12 either. One of the top dogs that we don't like, I don't like Texas. I don't like their offense. I think their offense is subpar at best. Their defense lost Big 12 defensive player of the year, lost defensive lineman of the year. They lost a guy who scored 3 touchdowns on defense last season. And then on top of that, you lose the leading tackler from last season. Come on, man. I don't like Texas at all. Who do I like? I think Oklahoma is pretty much a lock to get to the Big 12 championship game. They're plus 130. I think they are a lock to get to the championship game. Even if they lose 2 games, I don't think that leaves them out of the championship game. The team that they'll be playing against, though, in my opinion, the value of the Big 12 is TCU. TCU, as I said, will have the number 1 defense in the Big 12. They will have an offense that has some firepower, not a lot, but some firepower. They'll have the best special teams in the Big 12 as well. They'll have the best kicker in the Big 12. You're talking about a team that will rely more on their defense, They'll have a rushing attack that's positive. They have a decent quarterback. Sean Robinson isn't going to light it up, but he's not going to lay down either. I love the fact, again, Blacklock, Bethley, Benagoo, those guys are back on defense. TCU will get to the Big 12 final. They will go over best bet of the Big 12. TCU over 7.5 wins. Best bet. And I have them winning the Big 12 at 7-1. That's the value here in the Big 12. TCU, Gary Patterson finally gets his chance at a Big 12 title. He will play Oklahoma. I say they beat Oklahoma during the regular season and Big 12 final. Big 12 championship. No, I don't think they have a chance at making the college football playoff. I don't think there is a team in the Big 12 that can make the playoff. It's too competitive, too even. Everybody's going to beat up everybody, and I don't think a 2-loss Big 12 team can beat out a 2-loss SEC or a 2-loss Big 10 team. I think they'll be left out this season. That's all for us here at On the Switch. From Travis and I, we always appreciate your all's suggestions, your all's comments. Make sure to head over to Twitter, drop us a follow at On the Switch 1. After that, click our link. Go ahead and head over to YouTube. Subscribe to us there. Leave us a comment. Again, on every iOS and Android platform, subscribe, drop a comment, 5-star rating. Let us know what you all think about the Big 12. Again, as we mentioned earlier on in the show, we'll talk about the Big 10 next. Talk about Ohio State and that little scandal and whatever's going on there. Will that affect them when it comes to winning games and winning the Big 10? We'll talk about that. After that, this weekend, big weekend coming up. College football starts this weekend. Colorado State, Hawaii, first game. You have the Travers Stakes from Saratoga. We'll have, Frankie. He'll be part of the email route. We'll be sending an email out on that. Then, of course, Saturday, we'll have Zach in the studio. We'll be talking about NFL, fantasy football. If you're doing drafts, playing DraftKings, we'll give you some insights when it comes to the NFL season. Again, from Travis and I, and here, everybody at On the Switch in Louisville, Kentucky, we appreciate you all listening, and we love you all.
On the Switch.